Hey, Fanboy Nation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
You're watching.
We're watching. You're watching Fanboy.
Fanboy. Fanboy.
Fanboy.
Fanboy.
A fanboy, etc.
Fanboy Nation.
Dot. I assume Tom.
Formerly known as the Professional Karate Association, now rebranded as the Professional Kickboxing Association. I am here with the legend himself behind the organization, Joe Corley. How are you today?
I am terrific, but improving. How about yourself?
Listen, I cannot complain. We have a mutual friend in Dad Magnus, who's a two-time PKA world champion, who just recently received a heart transplant from a marathon runner, and he's ready to fight for you again.
Incredible. Yeah, he showed up in a fight in Atlantic City one time. The doctor wouldn't let him fight because he had a heart murmur, and then he went ahead and fought for several years anyway. And we had him fight a guy here in Atlanta in the Omni, as a matter of fact, who had similar kind of problems. He had a guy actually shoot him in the chest from inside his car, and he had enough energy to go ahead and knock the guy unconscious after the guy shot him in the chest. So we had two guys with defective hearts fighting each other in Atlanta with their doctor's permission.
I think they had more heart than most people do today.
Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't think to say that at the time.
Well, Professional Kickboxing Association is the revitalization of the PKA. Earlier in our pre-interview, you said it was time, and this is the right moment for PKA to resurface after having been on ESPN and CBS and ABC, and a legitimate introduction to combat sports that wasn't just regular boxing, Western boxing, or wrestling, whether it was catch or the entertainment aspect of professional wrestling.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, people enjoyed, real fighting. In fact, that's one of the reasons that the UFC gained such popularity on Spike Network, was the fact that the lead-in was the WWE, and then the real fighting would come right after that. So it had the largest audience in cable television able to stay on and watch the real fights. And so ours was like the next level above boxing. And once our fighters got to the place where they had great boxing skills, then boxing fans enjoyed watching us as well as much as they did boxing.
Well, there's a lot of different striking organizations. Glory has a foothold in Europe. They tried for a little while in the United States, but after the miscalculation with the pay-per-view that they had at the Forum in LA, they kind of went back to Europe, even though they put on a great show, K1 style kickboxing. Lion Fight Muay Thai is big here in the United States. And then there's Karate Combat. But PKA is slightly more unique in the fact that your guys' original rules, and which are going to be re-implemented, are all the strikes have to be above the waist, like in Western boxing.
Yeah, that's true. And, our original rules in PKA in the very first fight actually had a rule that said you can't punch but 3 times in a row before you kick. And that was when they won their first world titles. And then when Bill Wallace and I fought, we fought a 9-round fight about 8 months after that. And in that fight, you didn't have any minimum number of kicks to throw. And so over the years, I guess from 1975 through 1994, we revised the rules over and over again. So the final rules that we ended up with and that we're coming back with is you have to kick 8 times per round. They have to be powerful attempts to land on a legal target area, and you have to do 8 per round. So if you have a 2-minute round, you're going to have 16 minutes of kicking. And then also our rules, we use the electric chair penalty for holding. If you hold the guy, the referee says to you, we write out the words for the referee, he has to memorize them. You've held him one time, that's the only time you're going to be allowed to hold. Every time after this, you're going to lose a point. Parenthetically, what that means to him, if it was going to be a 10-9 round for the other guy, now it's going to be a 10-8 round. And if it was going to be a 10-9 round for you, now it's going to be a 9-9 round. So, and the referees really hold them to that. So it forces them to kick, punch, And on our shirt here, you know, in our pre-interview, I tried to make sure you could see it, punch, kick, repeat, you know, so that is what the fighters do. Punch, kick, repeat, don't hold, don't hit the people when they're down, don't grapple, just punch, kick, repeat.
So this is full stand up. There's no clinching except a one-time warning. And then after that, it's a point deduction. No leg kicks, no knees, no elbows.
That is correct. And we think based on our history that we'll be attracting the greatest strikers on the planet. And that's really what our theme is. We're on the hunt for the greatest strikers on the planet. And so we've talked a little bit before about the fact that you have people that compete, let's say for the Olympics, like they did in karate this past year, and in Taekwondo, like they have, you know, literally since 1988, except for 96 here in Atlanta. And you have these fighters in all these countries, and they don't have anywhere to go as professionals unless they go in and have their legs kicked, and unless they go in and are willing to grapple, you know. So this gives all of these great fighters from around the world. We think about 80% of the martial arts competitors around the world stand up and punch and kick, not to the legs, but they just stand up and punch and kick and block. And so that's what we do.
And with that, doesn't it give the fighters a little more longevity in their careers? Because we've seen the nerve damage that's happened to fighters, especially within Muay Thai, to their legs, that they almost have no feeling in them anymore.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And, you know, we use the example of Tom Brady in football and the way football has changed the rules over the years to make sure that the athletes can't get clipped. They can't have other athletes on the other teams who purposefully take their legs out from under them. In soccer, you know, you have rules for harming the other guy's leg, and virtually in every sport in the world. You know, as we always say, that every athlete in the world has got to use his legs to get from point A to point B. And so why would it make sense that you would try to destroy his legs? We talked about one of our great fighters, Rick Rufus, who had to go over and do the K1 fights and do some of the other leg kicking fights. And he had to have his knee replaced last year. And he was just the most beautiful kicker we ever had, jumping, spinning, flashing. He fought 2 different fights with a fighter named Ernesto Hoost from Holland, who was just a great Muay Thai fighter. In the first one, he fought PKA rules. In the 12th and final round, he did a jump spinning 360-degree kick, which hit Ernesto Hoost right between the eyes in the 12th round. In the next fight, Ernesto Hoost just kicked him in the legs until he couldn't continue anymore. So which one of those fights were better, you know, for the fans?
And so with that, are you going to allow the spinning head kicks and heel kicks, axe kicks, things of that sort?
Yes, those are permitted, and those are probably the most dangerous kicks. But if you're you have to be some very special guy to end up making those happen. It takes so long for that kick to get there. I remember watching Kung Lee in one fight against somebody, and Kung Lee did one of those kicks, and it just and you know, you remember in the fight too where Machida kicked one of the guys with a flying front kick, and you know, later Steven Seagal would say, "Yeah, I showed him how to do that." But you know, for a karate guy, it just looks like it takes forever to get there. But the guy he was fighting, who was really a good MMA fighter, but you know, came from a wrestling background, it was like for a moment there, he was a spectator watching this kick coming at him. He said, "Oh my goodness, that's coming to my face." And it's hard to, you know, to really kick a good martial arts karate background fighter like that.
Yeah, that was Randy Couture's retirement fight. So
that's right. I think he lost a tooth on that too, didn't he?
I'm not sure if he did, but
Yeah.
Randy's lost a couple of teeth over the years, and you know,
He's
I'm
one of
never
the
going to
really
tell
good
that face to face because he's the nicest guy, but I don't want to get, you know, beat up by Randy.
One of the really good guys, absolutely. Yeah, we received an Icon Award one night in Los Angeles or Las Vegas on the same night.
Wow. And you know, the Martial Arts Museum is out here in Southern California. They're in Burbank. Is there going to be like any special presentations when you guys come out to Los Angeles as part of the martial arts convention? Or I'm sorry, part of Martial Arts Museum, or in Las Vegas where the convention is?
Well, we just talked to Michael Matsuda this last week there in Las Vegas, and we were talking about that. And I was talking with our people internally about how we would like to be able to set up a nice PKA area in his museum, and in the next year, really create and have it happen there, the PKA Hall of Fame, and be able to bring in all the greats over these last, it's 1974, so we're at what, 4.8 decades now. We have some great people that put in that Hall of Fame.
Well, you guys are going to need your own wing at that point.
Yeah, we will, and that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping he'll get a large enough building. He's getting ready to move it, so I hope it'll be a huge building.
Well, Michael's a great guy, and I wish him all the continued success with the museum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, PKA was unique in that your fights were 2-minute rounds, and in the tryouts that's going on now, you had mentioned that they would fight up to 7 rounds within the tryout, depending how far they advanced within the fights in the cities, in the 8 cities that you've gone to. Take us through the setup of that, and then what a championship fight would look versus an undercard fight regarding rounds and timing.
Yeah, great question. We're treating it like our friend Jeff Smith, who's the president on our sports and operations side in the new PKA worldwide. During the pandemic, he got me hooked on America's Got Talent, and I had never watched it before. And so when we set these fights up, we think, well, we've got two athletes going into the cage, and we're going to have 4 world champion judges sitting at the table. Jeff is going to be Simon Cowell, and then he'll be joined by 3 other guys or women. And then they will watch the fighters fight. They'll fight 2 2-minute rounds. We'll have our kick counters there counting their kicks. We won't penalize them, but they'll be counting their kicks. And then at the end of the first 2-minute rounds, 2 2-minute rounds, the judges will give them feedback. The athletes will respond. We'll record all that like we did in our trial. Got some great interviews with the fighters. And then the winner goes on to the next round, and then he fights another 2 2-minute rounds. And then the winner of that goes on and fights 3 2-minute rounds. So they fight a total of 7 rounds that day. And we call them they're not fighting, they're auditioning. And so when they come into the building, a doctor gives them a physical, they get weighed, ambulance is on hand, they can wear headgear in these trials. They won't wear headgears in the real fight, but they can wear headgears. They can wear any kind of clothes they want in the trials, anything that they're used to and comfortable with. And so they don't have to be in shape for a 7-round fight, but the better shape they're in, the better they're going to do in those 2 rounds. We did 2 rounds, so he said, well, let's see how he reacts in the second round to what happened in the first round. And then let's see how he reacts in the second fight to what happened in the first fight. And let's see how he does in 3 rounds after only going 2 rounds before. So we get to look at a lot of depth, if you will, of the fighter. Then when we put the microphone in front of them and interview them, we have an idea of what their charisma is like. And obviously, everybody loves charisma. We talked about it this last weekend. We did a tribute to Bill Wallace again, and we said that we've finally defined charisma in the fight game as being really, really good at something, and then having just the right amount of being endearingly crazy. So like Bill Wallace is crazy, everybody can tell he's crazy, but that's where his charisma comes from. Muhammad Ali, same thing.
Conor McGregor currently in the UFC, it's worked for professional wrestling ever since Gorgeous George, who was a psychologist. So
yeah, which was Muhammad Ali's not mentor, but role model, I guess. Yeah.
As this goes about, what if there's a knockout in these trials? You got a 2-minute for first fight. All of a sudden, guy comes in, jab, spinning heel kick, and then the guy's out. That's the end.
Well, yeah, that's the reason we have the doctor there, of course. But if a guy gets in trouble, then the referee separates him, lets the guy clear his head, so that it's really not a fight. It's really like sparring, but we get a chance to see what they can do in sparring.
Okay. Yeah, because that's something you got to worry about. It's a tryout, and then all of a sudden 2 jabs and a heel kick, and that's it. It's over. We didn't see anything.
Yeah. No, and that can happen. It did not happen in New York, but we did have some hard blows that landed that where one of the people didn't want to continue afterwards. But yeah, that's definitely a possibility, but it's not a probability.
Now, the original uniforms of PKA were a bit more satin in design, very sleek. You had the foot covering. What are the gi pants going to look like? Are they going to be like the satin Muay Thai shorts that we have today? Are they going to be full length pants? Are they going to have that shimmering glossy look from the 1980s? Like, how is the apparel going to be?
I never was a fan of the satin pants myself, but I did wear them in the rematch that I did with Bill Wallace because they were white with a black stripe on them. And our plans now actually have a good front kick landing in the chest of Bill Wallace, but it's fully extended. But the line there shows the power of the kick where it was going. So we look forward to having pants that can fit tight in the hips, tight in the thighs. They're probably going to be like a polyester blend of some kind. We hope to see the PKA down the leg with, kind of turned sideways. So if a kick comes up, then you're looking at the PKA, in a horizontal mode, and then an arrow coming down from that pointing at the shoe. And we hope to have special shoes designed that would not be ugly. There's some really ugly shoes that had been made that had padding in them, and we don't want ugly ones. We want our fighters to be the best dressed fighters on the planet. But inside the shoes will be the padding that will protect them. So it'll be just like the padding inside the boxing gloves. All the fighting you see now sees, bare feet against the skin. And I know you've been around the game for a long time. You know that the people from the athletic commission sit in the locker room with everybody, make sure that they've got brand new gloves on, make sure that they don't beat on the gloves. Oh yeah, but what's wrong with kneeing him in the face, or what's wrong with kicking him with a bare foot in the face attached to the most powerful muscles in my body? I don't know. Those are the rules, they say. So what we want to do is have some padding between the striking surface and the body of the person. So imagine then those pants with that arrow pointing down to the foot, and you've got a slow motion kick or a still shot with your foot landing on my head. Then you've got an arrow pointing from your hip all the way into my head, and also a great place to really profile our shoe sponsor.
Now, would it be a full cover with a sole, or would it be just the top layer cover, like the old school karate shoes?
It would be a sole, but it wouldn't be a sole like we would wear on the street. It's just a very flat thing, and you would only wear it in the cage or in the ring. You would not wear it. You couldn't wear it outside because every time your foot turned, it would tear the padding up.
Now, speaking of cage, there is the PKA striking cage that you guys have developed. It's no longer the traditional boxing ring. What made you guys want to go into a cage versus the old school traditional ring that we've seen for so many years with PKA?
Well, when UFC first came out, it occurred to me that, all the wrestling matches would be held in rings, but then when the big fights came up, they would bring a cage in, they would drop it in on the top. So the thing was, you couldn't escape from the ring. You couldn't run out because you were inside the cage. And so I was saying, that was just masterful that, the MMA fights would be held in a cage. And then it occurred to me here that our fans, the ones that we want to reach, we've got fans, from 40 on who really enjoyed PKA, who've reached out to us saying they're great that it's coming back. But we've got younger fans that wouldn't know about it, and they've really watched the best fights they've watched have been inside a cage. So it just seemed to me we could call it the striker's cage, put them inside, and the the fighters have told us that they like the fact that they're not stuck in a corner like they would be in the ring. This is after they did it inside the cage, and they really like the feeling. So there's no time where one guy's in the corner back against the ropes and someone's hammering him. You see it happen in the MMA, but mostly the guys that want to get you against the cage want to grab onto you. They're not working on you like they would in boxing in the corner or kickboxing in the corner.
And is it going to be a circular cage, or is it going to be a hexagon or octagon, or any specific design that you're looking for the final cage?
No, the main thing we're looking for is the square footage. We'd like it to be about 320 square feet or more. You know, we find that a 320 square foot cage gives you about the same mobility inside it as a 400 square foot ring. You know, I was talking a little earlier about a lesson I had with Dr. Mong Ji. Dr. Ji was from Burma, and so he trained in Bando. And Bando is, you know, a real first cousin to Muay Thai. And so first lesson, he said, okay, here's your ring. I'm going to do 2 lines here, 2 lines here. And there's 9 segments I'm showing you in this ring. And 4 of those segments are over here in the corner. This is where you don't want to be. So if I draw a circle inside the ring, that's why we call it a ring, because it's a circle. I want you to fight inside that circle. And so what we find is in the cage, and I just learned this when I watched it happen in New York, because I had never been in the cage before, but I talked with one of the fighters afterwards. He said, yeah, I wasn't felt never like I was in a corner. I could always move out. So whether it's an octagon or a pentagon or a circular type cage, I think it's going to have that same effect. Hexagon or a pentagon may have a little tighter corners there, but none of them are going to be like the 90-degree corners in the boxing ring.
Okay. And with that, you know, stylistically, you know, we have karate fighters, and there's Kokushin or Goju-Ryu or whatever, and then there's, you know, Shotokan, or there's Taekwondo or Kung Fu and Wing Chun. Are those styles going to be pitted up against each other, because they're all striking styles? And like Bruce Lee had said, you know, you only have 2 hands and 2 feet. So
yeah.
Are we going to be able to see which style can even dominate in PKA at this point?
Well, you know, one of the things we learned way back when was no matter what, that when you put those boxing gloves on, you really are going to need to learn to box. You're going to need to learn to throw jabs, crosses, hooks, and uppercuts. And, you know, you can't do a reverse punch and a ridge hand, you know, like you would expect to in an ungloved hand that would, you know, incapacitate somebody in a self-defense situation. So you've got to learn to put the combinations together. And in our first world championship, the only fighter that could really box was Joe Louis. So when we went into the ring that night in Los Angeles, everybody thought this is going to be full contact karate. People are going to be getting hit with these full contact punches, and they're just going to be, you know, they're going to be knocked out immediately. And it was so sloppy compared to where it ended up that it was really hard to describe it. It was a ropeless ring, you know, the person, you know, would go out of the ring and all that. So you just have to learn to box. So the stylistic differences are going to be less with the gloves on, but the distancing, the footwork, and all that stuff could really give a lot of people trouble. We had a fighter named Tayari Cassell, who was a wushu fighter years ago, and he was so weird and wild stances, gave Benny Urquidez a lot of trouble trying to find where he was in the ring.
It does make for an interesting spectacle, though.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and it's great promotional stuff too, especially to their fan base.
Now, are spinning back fists going to be allowed?
Yes.
So back
Not spinning elbows, though. You know, John Jones is so good with it, spinning elbows, and several other guys we've seen really good with that. No spinning elbows.
Okay. So spinning hammer fist, spinning back fist, but no elbows. Got it. And
right.
Then no elbows and knees at all. No headbutts, obviously. I think headbutts have been banned in the UFC since UFC 3 anyway.
Have they? Yeah.
So
yeah, I didn't know I was interesting thing, I was with the guy that ran the pay-per-view at their event that they did in Denver. And I think it might have been their second pay-per-view event. Herb Perez was one of the commentators. Jim Brown was a commentator. And so I knew both Jim Brown and Herb Perez. And Herb Perez kept asking me, to do an interview, and I kept putting it off. And so the guy that was managing the pay-per-view, I was there as his guest, and he said, it looked like you didn't want to be associated with this event. May I ask why? And I said, well, there was a fight, a few fights ago where you had a fighter named Pat Smith who knocked somebody out, and he was on top of him, and he was hitting him with an elbow, and the referee didn't stop the fight. Pat Smith stood up and stopped the fight. I said, I wouldn't like to see you. This guy was an attorney by trade. I said, I wouldn't like to see you, in a deposition, talking about why this man may have passed on as a result of that. He said, well, nobody's ever died in this, have they? And I said, well, that's not a question you're supposed to be asking right now. So later that night in the party, he said, Jim, Joe Corley, I want you to meet. He said, yeah, Joe and I know each other from years ago. He said, he thinks we're going to need rules in this thing. What do you think? And Jim said, oh, we absolutely are going to need rules in these things. So that was one of those pivotal nights, where, because it used to be called no holds barred, but then there's some legal downsides to that. So I think
that would create some underground issues at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And nobody, no promoter anywhere wants to see anybody, really, really get hurt, even though it was a great promotional line early on.
Right. You don't want a one and done fighter.
No, I mean, it's just, and you see things happening. I saw one the other night where a guy was down, he was lying sideways on the mat, and the guy was hitting him with elbows down right around his temple. And you just know what was happening inside the brain, just going like that. It's not fun.
No, definitely not. But PKA is now, has an expanded board. You have Jeff Smith, Jim Thomas, you have Rich and Howard. Take us through how you brought everybody together to be a part of the PKA leadership team.
Well, one of my favorite books over the last few years has been God Winks, and it's when God winks at you. And the premise is that things that we think of as coincidences at the time turn out to be some kind of movement of things around in planets on the planet, where this person had this experience and that experience, and they went out and they did these things, and they all came back together. So I started working with Rich and Howard in 1982 in Allen Taylor Communications in New York. And then we went all the way through 1987 with Karate Mania 2, all working together on that. Then Rich went off and he became the president of Caesars World Sports. Howard went off and he bought a hockey team in Syracuse. He's had it for 29 years now. And in the course of that, they added all these other skills to their skill set. Jim Thomas and I stuck with the PKA, and along the way, because he was a friend of Jeff Smith, and because his instructor asked him to fight a fighter that was ours named Jerry Rome, he ended up in the ring with Jerry Rome, and then Evander Holyfield would come into their law firm and see a picture of Jim on the wall with Jerry Rome. And Evander had been a sparring partner for Jerry Rome in his kickboxing days. And so he said to Jim Thomas, I want you to be my attorney if you've been in the ring with Jerry Rome. So all of these things happen. And if you're at 30,000 feet, you just see it all kind of come back together like it was supposed to be like that. And the good news for me is that each and every one of them is smarter than I am. They're more creative than I am. They know the right things to do, the right time to do them. And I just get a chance to, they suggest that I do something, I just go ahead and do it. Many of them tell me that they wish all their clients were like I am, because I listen to them, because they're so smart.
Well, you had mentioned one of your colleagues came up with the "whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas" line.
Yeah, that's another one of those things, go figure. So when Mark Lazarus first went to NBC, the first few weeks he was there, we had a meeting with him to talk about our PKA plans, and he thought it was a great idea. Somebody else there didn't like it so much, but in that meeting, we talked about how the fact that Daniel Russ had been the one guy in the whole planet that the UFC picked to do their focus groups around the country. And then he also came up with the What Happens in Vegas Stays in Vegas. Another campaign he came up with was called the Air Force's Do Something Amazing campaign, where hundreds of thousands of people would come out of high school and enlist in the Air Force through this online thing called Do Something Amazing. And he's just got this brain like that. When we did our pay-per-view event, I contacted him about 4 months ahead of time and said, I need a Where's the Beef commercial for us, so that when someone sees one, Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet. So, we were having to spend real money, for advertising. So he came up with a great campaign for us. The creative person over there at SET didn't like it at the time, so we did something else. But he's just got one of those brains that just puts it all together.
I love it. And is there a TV deal in play right now that I know is still under an NDA, or a pay-per-view contract that we're looking forward to?
Conversations are happening. The thing we experienced back when the leg kicking first was introduced to television, NBC, I think, was the first one that did it. The high-level executives and the networks in those days liked the fact that we weren't doing those kind of things. We're finding this same thing is happening again. Of course, the world has changed, so the whole world is used to seeing a lot of these things. I think they like the fact that we're going to come back and we'll be a category of one. In the MMA world, you have UFC and then you have everybody else. In the kickboxing world, when I think about now, I think about Glory or maybe some of the remnants of K1 being at the top, and then there's everybody else down there. But PKA will be a category of one. We'll be the only ones doing what we did originally.
Well, I'm excited for all of that, and I can't wait to see PKA come back to an arena near myself and everyone else. Where can we find PKA on social media if we want to connect with them, and the official website, so we can go check everything out if we want to sign up for the mailing list?
We're PKAworldwide.com on the website, and then everything else is PKA_worldwide. And so that's true on Facebook, on Instagram, and we're adding to the team here in the next week or so some real social media experts who will have us virtually everywhere. So if we're good and a little bit lucky, you'll be able to see us almost everywhere soon.
I'm looking forward to it. Oh, and one last thing before I forget: will there be a women's division, or will that gradually be added to PKA?
Yes, there will be a women's division. As a matter of fact, at our event in New York, we had Heather Hardy come in, and she fought with one of the girls. Heather Hardy's story, for those that didn't know, she was a single mom living in an apartment with her mom in New York. Someone gave her a pass to go into Gleason's gym, and she ended up as a world boxing champion. So she came in to fight with this girl who came in who was a single mother of three. And the single mother of three said, I was just terrified and so excited to be in the ring with Heather Hardy. But she told me that day, and also Chris Algieri told me that day, that both of them would like to be able to come back to kickboxing and win another world title with us. So we're hoping to be able to make that happen for both of them.
Wow, that's going to be incredible. Joe Corley, thank you so much for your time. Professional Kickboxing Association is back. PKAworldwide.com, PKA_worldwide on all social media platforms. Joe, it's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.